Hi, and welcome to Couch Conversations Beyond the Textbook, where real talk meets real life in the world of mental health. We're your hosts, Abby and Bethany, two therapists who have been through the textbooks and are entering the trenches. This is a space where we unpack what they didn't teach you in grad school, the messy, the meaningful, and the moments that shape us as professionals and people. So grab a seat on the couch and let's dive in. Please note that the content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of a qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding your mental health or medical condition. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of any organizations or professionals they may be affiliated with. If you are in crisis, or if you think you may have a mental health emergency, please call 911 or contact a local mental health crisis line or emergency service in your area.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our fourth episode of Couch Conversations Beyond the Textbook. We are excited to be chatting together today, but today we're going to be talking about self-awareness as a counselor, specifically self-awareness while you're going through grad school, through some of the different clinical experiences, the importance of self-awareness and what that looks like and feels like and felt like to us while we were walking through that. So, how you doing, Abby?
I am living the dream. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just working and doing all the things through summer.
Yeah. School's getting ready to start, so we're ramping up over here.
So, tell me your take on this topic. What do you think? Self-awareness. What is that? What sticks out to you?
So when we started our grad program, I have always considered myself a very self-aware person. I've always thought I was very self-aware until I started this program.
Okay.
And self-awareness in a graduate counseling program takes on a whole different meaning, in my opinion. It's just a more in-depth look at what that looks like. And that was equally as refreshing as it was terrifying for me, I
Tell me about both of those things. Equally refreshing and terrifying.
Well, because I pair self-awareness with self-care. Really, I think that you can't properly care for yourself unless you're aware of your needs and what's going on. But there's also the terrifying aspect of self-awareness and what that looks like sitting with a client.
Mm.
And that can just be scary because you're having to keep yourself in check the whole time and be very in tune with what's going on.
Yeah. So for you, when you were doing your first time sitting with clients in practicum,
Mm-hmm.
is there a time that you felt that self-awareness was really necessary or really came into play for yourself?
Well, it's funny, and I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but I remember sitting with my very, very first client, that poor client in practicum, and being so overly concerned with how I was presenting and how things were going in session that looking back, I don't know that there was anything therapeutic about that first session because I was so wrapped up in myself. Um, am I saying the right things? Am I doing the right things? How am I presenting to her? Am I being what she needs? Um, Things like that. So yeah, self-awareness is so prevalent in grad school for counseling that I think it becomes overwhelming when you sit in that seat.
Yeah. Would you say that's the first time that you really had considered self-awareness, or did you think about self-awareness and its importance before you sat with clients?
I think I thought about it differently. I think for up until that point, self-awareness was being aware of my own emotions and like keeping myself in check as far as like my insecurities and um, being aware of like the work I need to do on myself. And then sitting in session, self-awareness became more in that first session. I had to evolve, but in that very first session, it became almost like a self-criticizing and self
Mm.
doubt and the awareness of myself, but it was not necessarily positive.
Right. So how would you say you got out of that mindset from the first session? Because I think that a lot of people can probably relate to that, or
Yeah.
that's a big fear for people going into
Yeah.
their first session with a client.
Supervision. That's where self-awareness is necessary. Way more than when you're sitting in that session, is being self-aware with, okay, this is where I'm struggling. This is what I've noticed going on in my head while I'm sitting in session, and then being vulnerable enough to talk about it with your supervisor.
That's such a good point. Supervision is incredibly important in our journey, and I hope for everyone that they can have a good supervisor. I know there's a lot of different clinical supervision experiences, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point throughout our podcast, but being able to be honest about where you're at, especially, I mean, all the time, but especially when you're first starting, being able, because your supervisor knows that you're going to feel this
Yeah.
way. But I don't know why it feels or felt so hard then to talk about it.
It is. And I'm a little biased, but I firmly believe we had the best supervisor that anyone has ever had in the history of counseling. But I like to think that if we hadn't come in with those questions, she would have been very concerned and with those insecurities and the things that we were thinking. As far as why we do that, I mean, I think that we go into practicum thinking, okay, I have all this training under my belt, let's put it to use, and we're supposed to be better than we are. And we don't look at ourselves as like we're babies in that session. It's supposed to be hard. We're supposed to feel that way.
Right. So when you noticed that in your first session, that you were thinking more about yourself and how you were presenting and the things that you were saying, making sure that you're hitting all your skills and things like that,
Oh,
how would you say, like, when did you start to notice a shift in when you got out of that difficult mindset?
first, I gotta say, I love that you are laughing as you're talking about it because I know you probably felt the same way.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The remembering of what that was like. And I just think that practice, like having support say to you, it's supposed to be like that. You're supposed to feel that way and it's okay. And knowing that there's permission to be like, I think the biggest thing our supervisor said to me was, you're not going to screw anything up. You cannot mess this up. And that gave me the permission to get out of my head.
Mm-hmm. I think something too that at least our program did is we had to do our own personal counseling sessions with a therapist before going into practicum, I believe. And so I think that that really highlights the importance of being self-aware as well, that knowing as, counselors, we're going to also be going through life things. And what does that look like when you're still working with clients and going through sessions, but on your personal life, you're also going through things, and how do those two things impact each other?
So tell me how that worked out for you.
Well, I think it always is you always have to be conscious of where you're at in a session. I can find myself very easily, if something is going on in my personal life, either connecting it to what the client is saying or getting sidetracked in my head. So it's kind of a fight to remain self-aware sometimes in session, to make sure that you're being intentional with clients, because life does happen and we're experiencing during sessions our own emotions and thoughts and feelings. And so making sure to remain in it with the client when that can be really hard sometimes. Sometimes it comes more naturally, and then other times maybe not so much. And so I think that that's still something I think any therapist would say, that they go through that every session or all the time. Like, it's not something that you all of a sudden no longer have to be self-aware because you've got it all figured out.
Right. I think, to your point, staying present in the room might sometimes look like acknowledging that you have a thought that's outside of session, acknowledging your thought so you can get back. and being able to do that quickly. And that comes with practice and also, like you were saying about having our own things or relating to what our clients are talking about, um, the amount of times that I had to physically stop myself from saying, oh, I did something similar, or I've been through that too. And the amount of times where you relate to what they're saying because you have experience, but you have to let them have their story and to have their experience and to have it to go through it their way, um, and being self-aware enough to say, okay, I'm acknowledging that I've been there, but stopping yourself from bringing it into session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is so true that so much is happening in the room at at one
Yeah.
time in one session, and I think that most people who haven't done it, who haven't been on the therapist side of things, probably wouldn't really understand what that means. So explain to someone listening that is going into grad school or starting to work with clients, or maybe is just listening because they want to hear our voices and our opinions on things, or the therapist side of things. Explain to them what that means when we say there's a lot happening in the room. What's your take on that?
I think for me, it's a lot going on in my mind. I am listening first and foremost. Then I am trying to think, um, from a theoretical orientation, a theoretical lens of how we can tackle our goals that we have for our client and what's going on with their lives. And then you're thinking about other therapeutic approaches and having just therapeutic, um, and clinical questions and being able to guide the conversation without taking control of it, without taking control of the session, because it's their session. It's your client's session to take where they need to take it. But it's our job to have a clinical path, if you will. And then you're trying to keep it under 50 minutes. And so you're trying to make sure that you're not jumping on anything big in the last 10 minutes of your session. You're unpacking, so you want to start wrapping it up instead of unpacking something big. I mean, there's just so many, and then staying self-aware where you're at in session. And there's just so much going on in the session as far as when you are sitting in that therapist seat and you're doing all of that while staying very present with your client.
Yeah, even as you're talking, I'm just thinking about how much is going on in our heads
Hmm.
when we're sitting with clients. And I mean, you gave a great picture of it. And then on top of that, there's what's going on with the client in the room. Like, are we
Hmm.
noticing their body language has changed?
Right.
Or are they starting to get more emotional on a certain topic? Or are they shutting down? Things like that, where you're always having to be aware of yourself, but then also aware of the client and
Hmm.
what they're saying, what they're going through in the room. And sometimes that can feel really loaded. Like there can be just a lot there
Yeah.
in the moment. And that's not even to like bring up countertransference or transference in general between a client. And that is just even more complexity to that space, which is beautiful, but difficult at times.
Right. Well, and countertransference and transference goes right alongside with your self-awareness. And those two words have been kind of going around in my head, countertransference and transference, because it is, you have to be aware of that as well.
Yeah. So for anyone listening that might not know what countertransference or transference is, transference is maybe when the client seems to view the therapist as someone in their life. So maybe their mom or their dad or their friend, and they start to maybe project that onto the therapist. And on the flip side, countertransference could be when the therapist starts to view the client as someone that they are not. So maybe their child or their mom or their grandma or grandpa or whoever it might be. Um, and that is something really important for therapists to be aware of within the session as well, personally and with the client.
Yeah, yeah. There is, I mean, there's so much going on in the sessions. And then reading the room and knowing your client well enough to know when it's appropriate to address situations, like you said, when you're being aware of your client and addressing when they are being emotional. What are those tears? Tell me what those tears mean. Or whether it's I need to be quiet and let them sit in that. And it's just there's just so much. And at the
Yeah.
same time, it all just goes together.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's interesting to make those decisions as a counselor of, am I going to tap into this, or am I going to let them sit with what they just said? There's so much beauty in silence, and that is one of the scariest parts of starting grad school, I think, or sitting with clients. But there really is, their silence can be so impactful, but then also bringing it back to the room, we call that immediacy. So clients might be talking about something and we bring it back to what they're feeling in that moment. And that can really help a client with their own self-awareness as well. Because I think a lot of times clients will be talking about a life event or something and tend to not forget where they're at in the room, but they're not focused on it.
Right.
They might not have an understanding of what they're feeling as they're talking about that. Some clients might be laughing as they recount a really sad story, and that might be something that is important to bring up and bring them back to the moment and inquire about that.
Absolutely. And for two self-proclaimed yappers here, silence became a strength eventually for me.
Yes, I struggled with silence a lot. Silence
Yeah.
to me felt like failure when I was starting. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't have the right things to say to the client. And that felt like failure. And I didn't like it. It wasn't comfortable. And like you said, I like to yap. I'm a talker. And so then I would get in my head and think, oh my gosh, is the client uncomfortable? Like, are they thinking that I don't know what I'm doing? Even though I really didn't know what I was doing. And, um, but then eventually, as you start to, when you have a good silent moment with a client, I think that's when it hits you of like, oh, this was powerful. There was a lot. That was a loaded silence. It wasn't like a, oh, I don't know what I am going to say next silence, which sometimes does happen,
Yeah.
but it was used intentionally for the client.
That was all very self-aware of you.
Thank you. I try my best. Self-awareness doesn't always come easy though. And like we said, there's so much happening in the room that it can feel really overwhelming a lot of the time. Even now, sitting with clients being graduated, I mean, I'm still learning, I'm still growing as well. I'm still under supervision, of course. And I think that even now, self-awareness, it can be difficult.
Oh, absolutely. So tell me, when in grad school, what it was you think that prepared you the most with self-awareness and kind of being prepared to deal with all of it?
I think that my own personal counseling sessions helped a lot. I think that I was just able to talk through some things that I had gone through, that I was going through, that might impact how I interact with clients or things like that, my own life experiences, and even just getting to talk to someone who obviously had been through the schooling and the training. And we didn't talk a ton. I mean, we talked about the stress of grad school, but a lot of just my personal stuff too. And I think that that was helpful for me in understanding. Well, one, I understood why our program requires it, because it was helpful to talk through things before sitting with clients. Because guess what? The first client that's in my chair in my room is going through something similar to what I had just talked about in my own personal counseling session. So there's things that happen in your personal life that if you don't talk about with someone, it doesn't necessarily
Right.
have to be your own personal therapist, but obviously I would highly suggest it, then you're going to bring that into your room with the client.
Right.
And so I think that that's when I was like, oh, wow, this was actually really helpful to get these things off my chest so that I have the space to sit with a client who, if they're going through the same thing, I'm not going to be making it about myself. I can make it about the client as it
Right.
should be.
Right. You mentioned countertransference and transference and what they are. Can you kind of go into some of the dangers of them?
Yes. So I feel like I'm someone who has typically pretty good boundaries with clients. But the danger of countertransference is, as the therapist, if you're viewing someone even as yourself, that's what I find most dangerous. If you're viewing that person, as yourself, like, oh, I see so much of myself in them, then you're gonna start to project that into your sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, for example, I had a client who was struggling with a lot of social anxiety. And this was the first time that I'd really experienced countertransference. And because I had experienced that and continue to experience that in my own life, and I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I relate so much to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what to do with that, because it would make it so much easier to be like, oh yeah, I know what you're going through. Like, I know. And that takes away from the client, which isn't fair to them.
Right.
That's just one example. And then on the flip side, transference, which is the client viewing you as someone, I think I haven't, not that I am aware of, had that happen super often with a client, but I think the danger in that is if it's not addressed, then your counseling sessions might take a turn. Like, let's say they're viewing you as your mom or as their mom,
Mm-hmm.
and they start to view you as an authority figure in their life, and then they shut down. They don't want to talk to you. Things like
Right.
that. That's just one example, if not addressed.
Yeah. No, I think that you hit the nail on the head with that. And I just think it's important that as we're talking about self-awareness, why in counseling programs in grad school, they're so adamant on us becoming self-aware and understanding that self-awareness is more than just being aware of our emotions and our insecurities and how to become better, but it's so much more than that. And I think you gave some really good examples of why it's important to be self-aware.
Yeah. Do you think in your time with clients, have you struggled more with transference, countertransference? Where have you been at with, have you ever had a client that has viewed you as someone in their life?
I think I don't know. I've never had a client say that, or make me feel as if they're projecting anything onto me. I do know that my therapeutic alliance, my relationship with my clients is very important to build for me, and I start that from day one. And so by the time I've been with a client for 16 sessions, we are able to come into my room and laugh and giggle and have either very, very deep, tearful conversations or very silly, light conversations. Our sessions can be all over the place. And I do think that that runs the risk of for me, I have to keep the boundaries very, I am therapist, you are client. We're not friends. And that
Mm-hmm.
can be a very slippery slope. And that is something that I think I struggle with probably more in practicum than I did in internship, because I wanted all my clients to like me, right? And I tend to have a more lighthearted personality. Um, but that is something that I worked really hard on with my supervisor on how do I keep this boundary and keep this professionalism while not being myself and honoring who I am. And then as far as the countertransference, I guess I don't know that I necessarily felt a lot of countertransference. There was a lot of positions and situations where I related to my clients because I've lived a very full life, I will say, and I've been through a lot. And so for me, it was very much keeping my thoughts and my opinions about what I've been through to myself and only sharing if I thought like it was going to benefit them to not feel alone in it.
Yeah. I think you brought up an interesting point too, of when you're with a client and you want them to like you. And I think
Hmm.
that that's something I still tend to struggle with sometimes, because I can be more of a people pleaser in general, but especially during grad school and practicum and internship, I remember feeling that pressure of, I hope this client likes me, and I hope that they don't, fire me as their therapist, and I hope I do enough for them. And that is something in itself to be self-aware about, because that can be really harmful to the client and yourself. So where do you think that drive comes from, and how do you think it impacts you?
Well, I think that is the drive of someone, of like one of your clients to like you. I feel like our age difference has a lot to do with that. Where I've lived, I mean, I'm 45, so I've had a lot of people not like me, and I had to learn to be okay with that. Um, some people are going to like you, and some people aren't, and it's going to go the same with clients. Some clients you're going to connect with, some you're not, and you're going to have clients you don't like, and they may love you, but they you don't really like them, and you have to be okay with that, and you have to just say, okay, I can still be their therapist and think that they're annoying, and they can do the same, and that's okay because that's human nature.
For sure. And I think learning that a client, they might not like you and they might fire you as a therapist. And I have to remind myself, and I remember having to remind myself, not as much anymore. I don't take it as personally anymore. And I wasn't fired by any clients, but you get no-shows and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I had to remind myself, it's not really about me. And also, they might just need a different kind of therapist, and that's okay.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that, because each therapist is different. And I know for myself, there's some people that I would not connect with, some therapists that for my personal life would not connect with. And so I have to remember that when it comes to my clients.
Yeah.
But it made me laugh when you talked about there's going to be some clients that you just don't like, or you don't like working with, I should say. We obviously love our clients as human beings and understand that they have worth and dignity as a human being, but we might struggle to work with them.
Yes, our personalities may not mesh, and that's okay. I like when you said it's not about me, because that's my counselor mantra. Like, that session is not about me. I go into that session putting everything that has to do with me to the side, because every minute I'm in that office, it's about someone else. And that has become my mantra as a counselor. It's not about me in there.
Yeah. And I think that can be difficult to remember in hard sessions. I think that, every client that you work with is going to be different, and you are going to have clients that you like to work with better. Like, there's some that you're excited for, and there's some that you're going to wish would cancel that day because you might not have the energy. And that can be hard. And it's not that you don't care about their progress or that they, meet their goals, but maybe your personalities, or maybe this is where self-awareness is key too, of like, why does this client bother me? And that's something to talk about in supervision for sure. But asking yourself the question, what is it about this client why don't I want to see them when they pop up on my schedule every week?
Right.
Or why am I hoping that they terminate our sessions sooner? Self-awareness is super important in cases like that, because it really could be nothing to do with the client and a lot to do with yourself.
Oh, 100%. Everything you just said is the key of self-awareness. And if it is just a personality clash, then that's where the professionalism comes in. And we do still care so much. And we want to see growth, and we want to see success. And that's where the professional, you kind of put aside the personal stuff, and the professionalism comes in. And you still, you love them just like you do anyone else.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that I could give the key to self-awareness. Just
me too.
Fountain of knowledge over here.
And you're all of your 25 years.
Oh yeah, so much experience, obviously. No, still learning over here, and still learning about myself too.
Yeah, that never ends.
That will never end. So within your work with clients, what would you say you've learned about the most about yourself?
So our supervisor asked me that when right before we graduated. What did you learn about yourself in this whole situation? And I think the thing that I learned the most is that one, I don't know how to be anyone but myself. I've never been good at that. And who I am is the same as inside a session and outside of the session. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure. I think I just learned that I can do hard things. Really. What about you?
I think that I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I learned that I don't have to put so much pressure on myself in the room.
Hmm.
And I think that was something that I really had to work through because I tend to be more of a perfectionist. And so I wanted to
Hmm.
always say the right thing. And if I didn't have what I thought was the right thing to say, it bothered me, or I
Right.
felt like I was going to mess up my clients in some way, or I wasn't doing enough for them. And I, with my own self awareness and just talking about that through supervision and things like that, I just learned that I just have to, kind of like you said, be myself and bring what I know and what I have, and trust my gut as a therapist. Trust
Yeah.
what I said, and trust that the Lord is with me in that room as well, and he has given me the wisdom that I need to work with these clients, and he led me to this career and through grad school, and he's not going to leave me now. And so I think
Right.
that knowing that I have what it takes within myself to do the work,
Right.
and I went through the school and I graduated, and just allowing myself to trust that
Hmm.
and know that I'm not going to be perfect. I'm never going to be the perfect therapist, but what maybe I think I said the wrong thing. And sometimes this has happened where I felt like, oh gosh, I don't know why I said that, or I should have said that differently or said something else. But then the client might really take to it and really, I don't know, go
Right.
off of what you said. And so just trusting your intuition as a therapist and allowing yourself to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. I was going to piggyback off of what you said and say our clients have no idea what's going through our heads. To them, we are very professional therapists who know what we're doing. They don't know any different. So all of that insecurity and all of the things that we need to be self-aware of that are going through our heads at a million miles a minute, they have no idea.
Yeah. I think it's kind of funny to think about, just as we were talking about everything that is going through your head in the room. And then
Hmm.
really just knowing that, like you said, the client has no idea. The client
Right.
doesn't know what you're paying attention to, and they they just don't know. And there's kind of a beauty in that because it
Yeah.
gives you space to be, I don't want to say space for failure because that sounds bad, but space to make some decisions. Um,
And to be imperfect.
yeah, to be imperfect. Thank you. I was trying to
You're
think
welcome.
of how to
I
phrase
got
that.
you. I got you. Yeah.
But I
That
think
was
that
good.
yeah, yeah, just important to remember because it can feel overwhelming and quite stressful at times,
Yeah.
especially when you first get started and how you,
Yeah. And self-awareness is an ongoing process.
for sure. Do you think that if you would have started grad school, this is such a hypothetical question, but if you would have started grad school, like gone to college, you're 20, let's say you graduate at 25, how would
Okay.
you be a different therapist than who you are today going to grad school later?
I would not have had the life experiences that I have now. 100%. I lived a lot of life between 18 and 30, a lot of life, and had a lot of experiences, both good and bad. And I learned a lot, and a lot of what, you know, that time looked like is what I pull from as a counselor to relate to my clients and to kind of empathize with them. The amount of empathy I can have because I've gone through what they're going through.
Mm.
It's really helpful, and I would be a very different. It would look very different for me.
Yeah, I think that that's such a good point that you make too, of just knowing with our empathy is not that we necessarily have to go through what a client has gone through to
Right,
understand them,
right.
but our own experiences can give us more empathy for other people's experiences, even if
Yeah,
they're different than ours.
yeah.
Is there ever a client, this is going back to, clients that might be harder to work with. Have you ever had a client where it's been difficult for you to extend as much empathy as you would to maybe another client?
Oh, getting down to the nitty gritty here.
We're
Yeah,
asking the hard
absolutely.
questions here.
We're asking the hard questions, and it's coming back to you. Yes, yes, absolutely. I've had clients where I've had to go into supervision and say, I'm really struggling with this one, you know, for whatever reason. There are clients who will tick the boxes of your nerves, and to be able to sit in that with them and remember again, it's not about me and how I feel in the situation. It's about what is their truth and what are they sitting in.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me your experience.
Yeah, I think that, well, one, I have to remind myself of we are believing the client's perception of their experience. So
Yeah.
that's important to remember because you might be skeptical of did this really, what's the truth here? Um,
And that's not
but
talked about.
no, but we as therapists, I'm gonna believe how you perceived this situation.
Right.
And when you've built enough rapport, you can challenge the client and get, further and deeper into that. But I think that when it comes to empathy, one thing that I've struggled with and had to talk in supervision about is just the difference in going from, let's say there's a session you're talking with a client like about a breakup, and that is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And then you go to another session and you're talking about
Yeah.
someone whose parent just passed away or something like that. And having those two sessions back to back can be extremely difficult. And I think that that's not really talked about a
Yes.
lot either, but it
Yeah.
sometimes can be really hard to rebound and think, I have to have the same amount of empathy for both situations. When I know
One.
the person that's going through the breakup will probably be okay, but it's
Yeah.
the hardest thing that they've experienced so far.
Yeah.
And it's
It
all,
feels inconsequential.
yeah, yeah. And that's where I have struggled. And I think
Yeah.
any therapist would say that that can be difficult and that they've struggled with that. But that's part of self-awareness of, I'm not going to let this client go just because, or I'm not going to check out of the session just because I don't see their pain as valuable as the other person's pain, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And like I said, it's not talked about. And that is something that I do think should be normalized a little bit more because in supervision, that is something that we talk about a lot. And you will have a client who comes in and they're distraught because their dog died. And then the next client's going to come in and they're going to have been sexually abused and they're distraught. And it's really, really hard, like you said, to rebound from one to the other. And to sit in the pain of one is not different than sitting in the pain of the other. And you have to remember that, like, their walks are just different. Their walks are just different. And the pain is the same to them, but different to us.
Mm-hmm.
And the empathy level has to be the same. But it's
Yes,
hard. It's very hard. And it needs to be okay that it's hard.
right. And clients' experience of pain is so subjective to
Right.
what they can handle, because one client might go through a breakup and be totally fine, and another might go through a breakup and think it's the worst thing in the world. And you really just have to go with the client and not lose sight of the fact that pain is pain, whether it is something that society or that even in our own heads we view as so much worse. That client is still going through something that's painful for them, and it's important that we walk alongside them in that, because that's our job.
And if as the counselor you're struggling with that, you need to be self-aware enough to say, I'm struggling with this. And go to your person, whoever that person may be. Go to your person and say, yeah, I'm really struggling with this because this client has silly problems and this client has real problems, and it's okay to feel that way, but be self-aware enough to keep it in check.
Yeah, not bring it in the sessions.
Correct.
But definitely important to talk about, especially with a supervisor, if you're feeling that way. I think my biggest advice to someone when it comes to self-awareness is that you're going to have to turn into the little 5-year-old that's constantly asking why, but you're going to have to ask yourself, why am I feeling this way?
Yes.
Where is this coming from? And that would be the biggest questions for remaining self-aware. So why does this person's pain bother me? Why don't I want to talk about it? Why do I feel like it's not as important? Or why do I like this client so much? Why do I connect with this client more than other clients?
Right.
Things like that are so important. So turn into that 5-year-old, continue to ask yourself why, and then talk about it in supervision so that you're not alone in it.
Yeah. Get comfortable being vulnerable.
That can be difficult as a student, for sure.
For sure. But you have to be able to be vulnerable with your supervisor if you want to be able to be self-aware.
Yeah. And my hope is that anyone listening can experience good supervision. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in another episode. But if not, then find, maybe a colleague.
We'll get our supervisor on here.
Yeah, one day we'll get her on here.
Whether she
and we'll ask her all the why questions.
We may just have to show up someday and bombard her and not let her out of it.
Yeah,
we'll
I agree. I agree. So to close, what would you say is your biggest advice on self-awareness?
I second what you said. To stay vulnerable. You don't have to be vulnerable all the time with everybody, but be vulnerable with someone you trust, whether it be your supervisor, which hopefully that is your person. If it's not, a member of faculty, a trusted colleague, your therapist, be vulnerable with your insecurities and the things that are going on, and don't ever stop asking the why. Never stop.
Love it. Well, that's all we have for you guys today for our topic on self-awareness. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like or share. Share with a friend that might be going through a similar experience, or family member, all of that fun stuff, and follow us on all of our socials. We appreciate you guys listening.
As always, let us know what you want to hear about. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us on Couch Conversations Beyond the Textbook. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone you think can relate. Keep showing up, keep learning, and remember, the best growth doesn't always come from a textbook. See you next time.